Welcome to Houston Newsmakers Extra. This is a very important conversation about Middle Eastern issues here. Imran El-Badawi is the University of Houston Program Director of Middle Eastern Studies, and Professor Mark Jones, Dr. Mark Jones, Baker Institute for Public Policy. We're talking about a number of things relating to the Middle East. One of them has to do with how do we know how we've kind of gotten here. We've talked about that. But resolving it is going to be the big issue. On the program, we were talking about a two-state solution, which doesn't look likely anytime soon. What are your thoughts about long-term or short-term resolution to what's going on?
Yes. So, I will be forthright in saying that, I disagree with President Biden's direction in the sense that he is going to request several tens of billions of dollars to commit to military solutions. I don't think that there is a solution there. There is actually no end game. And in fact, among the Israelis, again, what is the point? Okay, so we go in there and we try to extricate Hamas, but we bludgeon thousands of civilians in the process. What's the end game after that? There's no answer to that. The answer has to be a diplomatic solution, and I'm inspired by the children of Holocaust survivors in New York and in Washington not a couple of days ago in the state capitol, protesting and requesting a ceasefire and the cessation of violence. And of course, looking towards a world which we already have the solutions for right now. If you look at Israel proper, you look at Jerusalem, there are already Jews and Arabs living side by side, lifelong relationships, high-fiving, eating falafel, everything you can imagine, that's already there. It's these, of course, Hamas, and then Israeli airstrikes and political considerations and intervention, which are absolutely souring and destroying everything. So we need to go back to the books, look for a diplomatic solution, and ultimately establish a state, one state or two state, I don't really know how we divide it, but a state that enfranchises both ethnic populations without discrimination based on religion or race.
And we've heard that. That's both sides have been saying that. I know President Biden talked about that as well, saying Palestinians deserve to be able to live in peace in a place they call their own, and so do the inhabitants of Israel. Your thoughts about this never-ending cycle? It kind of continues to go around: violence, talk about peace, violence, talk about peace. What's your thought?
I'm very skeptical. I've been working on the issue. One of the first courses I taught at the University of Michigan was Arab-Israeli conflict back in 1990. Things seemed pretty hopeless back then. They seem probably even more hopeless today. It was a long time. There's always the hope that at some time in the future things will get better, but we don't seem to be on that path. One part is that it probably requires a perfect confluence of forces, both on the Palestinian side and on the Israeli side, but then also with international actors who don't have an incentive to keep the conflict going. And with Iran active today, with Russia, and even with the United States in some ways, I think we're in a situation where the conditions aren't right for peace. I don't know if they ever will be. But it's a depressing situation, but it's not one that seems to be changing. But I think going to the point that anything the Israeli does in Gaza is unlikely to also move us closer to peace. If anything, it's probably going to move us away because it's going to create imagery as well as a number of deaths that people are going to remember for at least the next 5 to 10 years. And there is no end game. Even if you're not going to eliminate Hamas, you may weaken it, but not eliminate it. I think the ground invasion is far more to signal to the rest of the world, as well as to the Israeli population, that Israel is going to retaliate when attacked.
Is there any reason, thinking about Hamas and the Palestinians, what's the alternative for Palestinians in Gaza in terms of a group to represent them? It seems to me they really don't have many options there.
There are no good options. There are quote-unquote terrorist groups, including Hamas, Islamic Jihad. But, this goes back again earlier to the separation of the PLO from Hamas. Hamas was in part funded by the State of Israel in the 1970s and 80s in order to counter the PLO, because the PLO was the legitimate voice of the Palestinians. So I must also put some blame on the Israelis for separating the Palestinians into the West Bank and into the Gaza Strip, where we don't have really strong leadership on either side. So that is really very much a problem, that Palestinians don't have a strong leadership. We do need a confluence of circumstances that allow that. But I want to remind everybody again that Yitzhak Rabin, of course, the assassinated Israeli prime minister, who was an important leader, who stated that you don't make peace with your friends, you make it with your enemies. It's hard to make peace. It takes effort. And that's what we should be spending our time doing.
we're not spending our time doing anything in this country domestically to, I mean, people are talking about it, but Congress right now, I dare say that you've never seen anything like this in your political career.
No, the dysfunction in the U.S. Congress has gotten to an extreme where we're at a point where the Congress is now incapable of choosing a speaker. That is something as basic as having somebody who can run the U.S. House. We can't do it. And it's a combination of increasingly high levels of polarization, especially in the Republican Party, but also in the Democratic Party, and a growing hostility towards anyone who works with the enemy. So that a Democrat who works with a Republican is vilified by fellow Democrats. A Republican who works with Democrats is vilified by fellow Republicans. Put that together with a extremely narrow Republican majority of 221 to 212, and we have ourselves in a situation where neither side wants to give, and you have one irresponsible grifter named Matt Gaetz who decides to bring the whole house of cards down. And we're in a situation, even if Biden wants an aid package passed, we don't have a House to do it, at least at present. Even when he brings it there, there's a lot of resistance on the Republican side to tying the Israeli aid to Ukrainian aid. That is the idea that there's a lot of growing opposition to the continued sending of billions to Ukraine. And while there's strong support, nearly unanimous support in the Senate, I mean, in the House, there's going to be some resistance, but most Israeli aid would fly through. But tying it to the Ukrainian aid may cause some hiccups as well.
Final comments from you, Dr. Badawi. The challenges going forward here, you've seen a lot. Is there any reason to be optimistic about where we are right now in the ultimate end game of having some sort of resolution?
Two things allow me to enjoy some optimism in this world. One is young people who still know right from wrong. And the older we get, we become entrenched in wealth and power and positions and prestige. And it causes us to compromise our values. And that includes, of course, the BBC reporters and the UK Labour Party members, and even the official at the Department of State here at the United States, who all stepped down, who left their posts because they recalled right from wrong. That's one thing that gives me optimism. The other thing, of course, is that at the end of war, there can only be a diplomatic solution. So we can continue as American people to be persuaded or not persuaded. It makes no difference for what we're going to do. But at the end, there's only going to be a diplomatic solution. So it's kind of a delayed optimism in that sense.
All right. Well, delayed, I'll take it. Any kind of optimism, we'll take it. Dr. Badawi, Dr. Jones, thank you. Hey, this is Houston Newsmakers Extra. Please share this with everybody you know.